This is Doug Foster, the Truth Seeker, once again coming to you. How are you truth seekers out there doing this evening? Thought I would tonight talk a little bit about the name of the Father and how we come about having the names that we have now in our English translations. Now there are some translations like the Hallelujah Scriptures and different ones that have, they call them restored name Bibles, where they've restored the Father's name and the names of the prophets and the apostles and different ones. But I kind of wanted to talk about the Father and how his name has been changed in the Scriptures, and he even tells us that they would do this in Jeremiah chapter 23. But first I'm going to start here in Exodus 3. And people sometimes kind of confuse this here a little bit whenever Moses went up on the mountain there and he was talking to Elohim about the I am statement. They just read that and they don't read the rest of it. But he was making a statement basically when he said I am, I am. And I've always been. And there's, basically in that statement, I am and there's none other. But this is verse 13 of Exodus chapter 3. And Moses said unto Elohim, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel and shall say unto them, the Elohim of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And Elohim said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And Elohim said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. So he's saying right there that Yahuwah Elohim is his name forever. He's, so he told him that. And said, that's the name you tell them, that's my name. And that's my name forever. Don't change. But in the English, wherever his name was at, and it was the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, in the English. And in the Hebrew, it's Yod-He, Wah-He. And in the Hebrew, they don't have any vowels in their alphabet. They only have consonants, but they use what they call vowel pointers, which are little jots and tittles. They're just little tiny hooks and dots and stuff that point to what the vowel should be there in that place between the consonants. Well, the name of the Father, based on the arrangement of those consonants, you can pretty much gather how it's pronounced. And I also listened to someone who was a Hebrew. His parents or his grandparents came from Syria, and they were Jewish. And his parents, they came over here, but they were Messianic Jews. They were Christians. and that's probably one of the reasons why they were living in Syria, because he was, trying to avoid being where the large majority of the Jewish people were at, because they would have been persecuted. So, for their belief in the Messiah. And so he told his grandson that the way that they had always pronounced his name was Yahweh. So, and I don't see no reason why he would and when you look at the names of some of the prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah, well, their Hebrew names, Isaiah's Hebrew name is Yeshayahu, and Jeremiah is Yeshayahu. And so they, that Yahu in the end of their name, and anytime the Father's name is in the name of one of the prophets or something like that, or in the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the angels, or Malachim, in their case, it's usually always El, E-L, which is just short for Elohim. But it's always at the end of their name. But now, in the case of the Messiah, his name was Yahushua. He had the first part of the Father's name in the first part of his name. And that's the only instance where I know of that occurs. So, and Elohim, which is, we get the word God from that, is, hold on folks, I gotta wait on the customer.
Can I just get one of them items, whichever one from mine?
I'm back, folks. Sorry about that, but like I said last night in the last video, you gotta make a living. The word God is a singular word. Basically in verse 1, as where the word that it's derived from. Well, I think it's like Eloi, which is from Elohim. Elohim is a plural word. It means more than one. And I think in one of the previous videos I've done, I explained that Elohim, being a plural word, there are three entities that form Elohim. There is Yahuwah, Yahushua, and the Ruach. These three are one. They are one. Because Elohim is the spirit, and they are united in Elohim as one mind, one focus, one purpose, one goal, and so they are one. But it's like I said, just like a team, a sports team. There's many different people on the team, but they all act as one. They have one goal. Okay, so I know that's kind of a weak analogy, but to try to get people to understand, how they can be three separate entities, but they are one. Because whenever we become a part of Yahushua, then we also become one with him, and he is one with his Father. So that's and that's what he came to bring to us and to reveal to us these mysteries. But we lose because of translations, transliteration of names and stuff. A lot of times we lose something in that, and that's why study is important. And and like I said last night, Yahushua means Yah's salvation. Yahuwah's salvation. And for example, another name that it's readily known what the meaning is Yehoshua. Not Yahushua, but Yehoshua, which was Joshua. And his name means Yah's deliverer or deliverance, where he delivered the children of Israel into the promised land. Now, where I was going to tell you about how he prophesied, let us know that they were going to, conceal his name and change it. For example, the word Lord, translated into the Hebrew, means Baal. Baal, and Baal is a false god. Satan, basically. But he tells us here in Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 27. I'll start at 26. It says, "How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets that prophesied lies? Yea, they are prophets of the deceit of their own heart, which think to cause my people to forget my name by their dreams, which they tell every man to his neighbor, as their fathers have forgotten my name for Baal." And what a lot of people don't understand is, it wasn't during this time, but it was later, after the people had returned from captivity. And what happened, I believe, is, and of course I can't really prove this, but I think that there was some that came back from the captivity in Babylon, and they had fell in with those the Babylonian mystics, and which is where I believe they got the Kabbalah from, the Babylonian mystery religion. And when they went back to Israel, they took it with them, and they began to kind of slowly creep into the Levitical system, and bringing that doctrine of Baal and the Babylonian religion, bringing it into their, mixing it in with Judaism. And so as they began to spread it in there, they began to add their own doctrine, like I was talking about the doctrine of men and their own commandments and stuff, as opposed to the doctrine of the Father and his commandments. They began to infiltrate, and at some point, about 200 years before Christ, 250 years, what was known as the Zadok priests, which were the true priesthood, the true Levitical priest, they left and they took the Torah and they took the prophets, the books of the prophets and all that stuff. They took that stuff with them. Their maps, and they took their calendars, all that stuff. They took it with them, and they went to Qumran, which was the wilderness. They went there and they started living there and preserving their truth. And they were also they also began to get truth about the Messiah and stuff that and understanding about it that beforehand they were blind to. In the prophecies, I mean, the prophecies of Isaiah and in the Psalms, they're just full of prophecies about the Messiah. And he fulfilled them all. I mean, he fulfilled all of those prophecies. But they began to create this, what they called the ineffable name doctrine. Ineffable name doctrine. And what it was, and their excuse was, is they did not want to profane or take his name in vain. So they said, well, if we don't speak it and we don't write it, we can't blaspheme. But that's not really what they wanted us to forget his name. They wanted the people to forget his name. And of course, from what you've seen back there in Exodus chapter 3, he said, that's my name forever. And I want you to know that. I mean, otherwise, he wouldn't have told Moses that and told him to tell them that. And all throughout the first covenant books, the Torah and the prophets and the historical books and all, he always used his name. And then they began to do this, and at first, what they do, if you spoke his name outside of the temple, they would blackball you, basically. They'd kick you out, wouldn't let you come back in there to worship and all. And of course, people feared that, because they, like, if I can't come, because you had to come down there. You had to come down to the temple to participate in the festivals and in the worship services and the reading of the Torah and stuff like that. You had to come down there and do that. So they created this ineffable name doctrine, and then they made it so that it was a capital offense. I mean, they'd kill you, stone you to death or whatever if you spoke his name outside of the temple. The only time that they were really allowed for it to be spoken is pretty much whenever the high priest, the Kohen Hagadol, was reading from the Torah. Then he would speak the name. But any other time they wouldn't. And they would, if they wrote it down, they'd have to tear it up into so many pieces and all that kind of stuff, it was just insane. And so by the time that Christ arrived on the scene, they'd completely forgotten his name. The only ones that really were privy to it, of course, was the religious leaders. And if you notice, like with the Catholics, the same thing, they did not allow people to have their own Bible and to read their own Bibles. That didn't come along until Dewey Reams, and only then it was to try to counter the King James. And so, but up until that point, the Bible that they had, that the priests read out of or whatever, was inside their church, and they had it chained up so that nobody could mess with it. And it was in Latin, so the majority of the people could not read Latin. As a matter of fact, a lot of them probably couldn't read at all. But it was the early ones that started beginning to translate it into their language and stuff, like the Waldensians and people like that. And they were persecuted for it, and they were killed for it. But they were so dedicated that they would learn how to read. They would read and memorize an entire book, so that if somebody got destroyed their actual written books, they could remember it from memory. But anyway, back to the ineffable name doctrine there. So by the time that Christ came, these people were incredible zealots, And the people, you know, their priesthood at that time were zealots, and most of the people that were in that priesthood were people that were, you know, buddy with Herod, you know, and he was an Edomite. He was not even a Jew, he was an Edomite. He was appointed, of course, by the Roman prelate or whatever. And, you know, because they were what they called, I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's where, you know, they give you a title, you know, you're a king or whatever, but you're, you know, basically a pawn of the Roman Empire, you know, proxy, you're a proxy. And so, you know, and instead of picking somebody that was actually a Hebrew Jew, they picked an Edomite. Well, you know, the Edomites and the Hebrew people, they were enemies, even though the Edomites were descended from Esau. But they still, they had a hatred because of what happened between Esau and Jacob. And so, you know, it still went on. Well, then they appointed this guy upon, well, and what he did is he made sure that he put the people in there, the priest or whatever in the temple, that were favorable to him. And, you know, and they were all corrupted. And so when Christ come and he had went around and picked out his disciples and all, he began to reveal the Father's name. And he was saying it, and they hated it. You know, he says he come to reveal the Father to them, you know, and his words to them. And of course he reestablished that connection there, you know, by them knowing what his name was. That was, you know, and so he was speaking the Father's name outside of the temple, but yet he was still going into the temple and teaching. And he was probably speaking his name in there too, boy. And them priests, they did not like it. They didn't like it at all. And so, you know, and I'm not saying that the English, when they translated this, they just was translating it into what words they had in their vocabulary. I'm sure they could have used, you know, I think it had a lot to do with a bias towards the Hebrews, towards the Jews, in the fact that anything that sounded Jewish, they didn't want nothing to do with it, because they blamed the Jews for Christ's death, you know, and being crucified. Well, they played a part in it, but we all played a part in that. He died for all. He died for the whole world. We all were responsible for his crucifixion. So, you know, yeah, I mean, their biggest thing, you know, the biggest fault that they had is that they didn't recognize the time of their visitation. I mean, they had the Moedim, the appointed times. They had festivals that they had every year, and they were pointers. They were to let them, you know, okay, these are appointed times that are coming. Be, you know, so that whenever those things happen, they would recognize it. But they didn't. They didn't recognize it because, for one, these people of the synagogue of Satan had gotten into the temple, and that's why he was always telling them that, you know, that y'all are of your father the devil, and you're going to do what he tells you to do, and you're of the synagogue of Satan. Well, they were them, you know, they had brought that Babylonian religion there and mixed it in, the very thing that got them put into captivity to begin with, worshiping idols and false gods, setting up groves and high places. They were doing all of that, and they were sacrificing their children and all that stuff, making them pass through fire. And then yet, here they come back out of captivity, because a lot of them didn't come back. They stayed there. They made lives there, you know. I mean, and they were comfortable, you know. Especially after the Persians and the Medes took it over, they were a lot more beneficent, because, you know, Cyrus was considered one of probably the most beneficent kings of the ancient world, and he was responsible for instituting a wage for workers, and the ones that work for the king. Because normally people would just be conscripted. You come in to work here, and you're going to do it, and you're going to get a bowl of grits a day or something, and you're going to do it, and you're just going to do it. But he actually instituted wages and stuff, and was benevolent. So obviously, people wouldn't want to leave that kind of situation, if they were in that. And not only that, but a lot of them had gotten into the system. They had gotten into the political and to the religious system. And so they had gotten positions. They didn't want to leave that. But some of them did, and they came back, and that was only probably because they were being driven by, demonic or dark forces to go back there and infiltrate the church or their temple. And so, but that is I think that is one of the main reasons of why the names they just transliterated the names. It kind of sounded sort of like it. Of course, there's some on how they got the name from for example, Peter. His name was Simon Kepha. I don't know how you get Peter from Kepha. There ain't that much in the way. I think that was a Catholic thing there. But because their first pope was Peter, but it wasn't Simon Kepha. It was a Roman, or a Roman that was their first pope. It wasn't the Hebrew Simon Kepha. For one, Simon was the evangelist to the Jewish people. It was the Apostle Paul who was the evangelist to the Gentile. And that was because he could speak Greek, and of course I'm sure Simon Peter spoke Greek too, because that was the world language at that time. Even though the Romans had taken over that area, those people had been speaking Greek for a long time, and Aramaic. I mean, Hebrew had become sort of like a religious language, just like Latin in the Catholic Church. Hebrew had pretty much been relegated to being spoken in the temple and stuff like that. And I'm sure, there was some, that spoke it so that they could talk about the political situation or whatever there without fear of being understood, But the sort of like English is today, sort of the world language, Greek was, and they spoke Aramaic. But that's why a lot of the New Testament or the Renewed Covenant is written in Greek, with the exception, I think, of Matthew. I think it was Hebrew. And so you have to understand that, like I said about the names having meanings and stuff, we need to understand that. And that, I think if you don't know any better, the Father knows our heart. He knows, what that we're addressing Him when we say Lord or when we say God. But if we come to the knowledge of what His real name is and stuff, I think we should be using it. Now don't get me wrong, if you're witnessing to somebody, then you want to use those terms, because they're not going to know what you're talking about. If you're talking about Yahuwah and Yahushua and stuff like that, I usually will say Yahushua, Jesus Christ, or Yahuwah, God, Elohim, God, so that people will kind of begin to slowly put them together. And then the Ruach is, Holy Spirit. But those words like holy is a pagan word. It comes from, over in India, they worship the goddess holy. And spirit's somebody's dead, departed dead, So it's the Ruach HaKodesh, which Kodesh is like holy, you know, the connotation of it is, you know, set aside, you know, elevated, and so, you know, if we can learn these words and the Father's true name, but you know, we use it reverently. I mean, it's not, you know, just like if you were using God and Jesus and all that, you know, you would be reverent in the use of it. But you know, I think that a part of our learning, and I believe the reason that this stuff has started coming out, and I'm sure people's known about it all along, but it's not been mainstream because I think there's an awakening where people are awakening to things that he is revealing about his name and about the nature of the earth and about you know, creation and about the end times. And I think it's because, you know, he said in the last days all things will be revealed, and I believe they are. I believe that these things are being revealed so that we are not in error. Because in, I believe, I was looking at it here earlier. I don't think I captured it, but it's in the book of Acts, where Paul went to Greece, and he was in Athens, and he was talking to those people over there about, they had an altar there on Mars Hill to the unknown God, and he says, well, I come to talk to you about him, you know, the unknown God, to tell you who he is. And he said, you know, at one time that he winked upon man's sin, you know, and ignorance because of their ignorance, but no more, for we are without excuse. Because we have a conscience, you know, and you don't wink on it no more. I mean, we you know, we're without excuse. We have a conscience. We have this. Those people didn't, and so, you know, we have his truth. We have his word, and he wants us to know him. He wants us to know who he is, and he's not far from us. You know, I'm not going to get into flat earth and all that stuff, but I'm just telling you, the earth is not what we've been told. It's a lie. The Father sits upon the firmament. His throne is on the firmament, and it's right there. I mean, he sits right there. He's not in some galaxy far, far away like we've been led to believe. We've inherited lies, and they're being debunked. These lies are, you know, they can't hold these lies up anymore. They're caught, and they know it. But it's, you know, they don't care because, you know, we're coming to the end of it. So they don't care if you know or not now. And of course, the Father, you know, there's over 200 scriptures, you know, talking about his creation, you know, the earth and the firmament, and you know, he thinks that, you know, some people will say, well, what difference does it make, you know, whether we're on a globe or whether we're on a flat earth or not? Well, I'm thinking he thinks it's important. He thinks it's important, and David did too, because David said, the heavens declare his glory, and the firmament showeth forth his handiwork. I mean, the firmament is the most incredible piece of work. I mean, workmanship, it's just beyond belief. And yet, and that's why it's so hard for people to, you know, to really hold on to it. You know, it's easier for them to, you know, the paradigm that we have been brought up in. You know, I used to say, man, I can't, you know, I'd love to be on the SS Enterprise or whatever, you know, traveling through the, you know, the galaxy, going to worlds far away, and, you know, strange new worlds and all that kind of stuff. And I studied, you know, I used to love science and study all about planets and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And all of it's lies. That's all lies. And, you know, I was awakened. was awakened to the truth. And when I got to reading this is a flat earth book. And I will, as time goes on, I'll gather up some scriptures and stuff and I'll show you. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's obvious. And, some people say, oh, well, it's accommodation. He was just accommodating us. We were ignorant. Well, I got news for people. Those people back then were really more smart. They were smarter than we are. And the ones going back before the flood, they were even smarter and more intelligent. I mean, you think about it, okay? They lived in a pristine environment. The world hadn't been all corrupted, and it hadn't been destroyed by a flood and damaged. And they lived for, long periods of time. I mean, Methuselah lived 969 years. So here's a man living 969 years. Think if he had the capabilities or the abilities of somebody like Nikola Tesla. And look at what Nikola Tesla accomplished in, I think he lived to be about 77, 78 years old or something like that. Maybe 80. You think about how much somebody like Methuselah living 969 years could accomplish. And because they, living that long, their wisdom, their knowledge, I mean, their experience, I mean, just no comparison. And we see all these megalithic structures all around the world, the Great Pyramids, Baalbek over in Lebanon, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, and many other sites all around the world that, our engineers and scientists today sit around and scratch their head. How did they do that? How did they build that? With copper chisels and bone hammers. They didn't build them. But the people, I'm not taking away from the Egyptian people, they had a lot of knowledge. Of course, a lot of it was esoteric, occultic knowledge and stuff, but and it's where they discovered stuff that made it through the flood. It didn't get destroyed. It was buried in caves or in underground vaults and stuff like that, and they got that knowledge. I mean, from what I understand, at one point there, and I'm not talking about the pre-flood Egypt or whatever, I'm talking about post-flood, they had something like 100,000 different colors of dye. So they were smart people. And they had batteries and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, the point I'm making here is that we're not we're not at the pinnacle of human development. I mean, not like we think we are. So or else we wouldn't be so easily duped by our by NASA and CIA and different ones that have been duping us all this time. NASA, an organization founded by Nazis and Freemasons. Think about that. But anyway, I'm gone too long. Thank you folks for joining in with me. I hope that you can take something away from this that might explain something that maybe you didn't know before, or it may stir you up to go and do a little research. Like I said yesterday, don't take my word for it. Do your homework. Be like the Bereans. Receive it with openness of mind, but search the scriptures to see whether they be true. And I love you. And I'll be thinking about you folks. And I'll see you on the next one. Please, if you feel free to join if you want. I mean, I'm not in this for the money. I don't care about getting, monetized or anything else. I'm here to spread the truth. I don't care about money. I care about people and where they're going to spend eternity. So with that, if you feel like leaving a like, please do. And leave a comment. I like to hear your comments, and if you got any questions or anything you ever want to ask, feel free. I mean, I'll do my best to answer them, if I can. And so until next time, see ya.